About the Declaration, we're about the Constitution. I'm sorry, they're lying to you, or they just are ignorant. But the Ninth Amendment to the Constitution needs to be carefully read, because the Ninth Amendment declared that the enumeration of rights in the Constitution shall not be construed to disparage or deny other rights retained by the people. What does that mean? It means rights they already have. You can only retain something you've already got, yes? What's the first set of rights we already have? The rights that come from Almighty God. And so nothing in the Constitution is to be construed to deny or disparage God's standard of natural right by which He has endowed us with the natural rights of family, with the natural right to preserve ourselves through family life and through self-protection, with the natural right to live peacefully in community with one another, with the natural right to enjoy the bread that we have earned in the sweat of our brow, and so forth and so on. All of these rights, which are expressed in our criminal law and which are expressed in the laws by which we govern our fair and dutiful relations with one another. All those laws stand or fall by our willingness to respect that understanding of right which the Declaration articulates. So the defining apostasy of our elites is that they now reject the Declaration. And I want to close on one note that I hope will remind us all of the stake we have in this, because the game that's being played now is that people who intend to reestablish a regime in America and, sadly, to facilitate the imposition or re-imposition of that way of life throughout the world, they are people who are trying to reestablish government by the few, by those who have power, by those who claim to be superior in some attribute of physical power, intellectual power, knowledge, prowess, so that the only people who have rights are those who can vindicate those rights with power. And no one else has any rights that have to be respected, because the root of right is not the will of God, is not the transcendent understanding of right and justice that human beings cannot tamper with. The root of right is the power of one human being to impose his or her or their will upon others. That notion that might makes right, it governed in every country, in every region, on the face of this planet in some form or another for thousands of years until the United States came along. And then suddenly there was this idea, no, every human being has a worth that comes from the hand of God, not from the power of those who rule, of those who conquer, of those who claim to govern on the basis of power alone. Don't we understand that there's not a movement for justice in this country? Not the abolition movement against slavery, not the civil rights movement against segregation, not the movement for women's rights, not the movement for workers' rights. No movement for rights that demanded that simply because you have the power, you don't have the right to abuse those who work for you, those who work with you, those who have less power than you, those who are younger than you, those who are infant. You do not have the right to murder. You do not have the right to exploit. You do not have the right to abuse. And if you do, then you violate a law that is supposed to apply to all of us, and we will call you before the bar of justice. And whether you are a scientist making what you think is the greatest contribution to mankind, or a lowly beggar, we will judge you by the same standard of law, and we will apply to you the same just punishment for your crime. That whole idea of equity, that whole idea of equal justice under law depends on the very notions of law and right that we are discarding if we discard the Declaration. And I think that's what's going on. See? Yeah, for the few, the wonderful, talented, powerful few who think they're going to end up on top, this might be a world to hope for. But what about the rest of us who have one reason or another to understand that whatever we may be, whatever uniqueness surely God sees in us, the world will not value it as He does. They may come even to think that because we cannot run as fast or jump as high or sing as well or compute as wonderfully that we don't deserve to be treated as human, that we can become the playthings again of some oligarchs, of some nobility that will take our wives and rape our children and run us down in the street if we were.